Honey, you got cash or are you going to use a card? Chastity's voice cut through the air like a sharp blade. 12 pairs of eyes were glued on me. 12 people who'd just devoured lobster, imported salmon, and wines that cost more than my monthly Social Security check. 12 mouths were now waiting for my answer, their smiles not quite reaching their eyes. I smiled right back. I opened my purse, slow as molasses, and then I said something no one expected to hear. But for you to understand how things got to that absurd point, with me sitting in a downtown Atlanta restaurant where the bill for a single table was pushing $8,000, let me introduce myself properly. My name is Evelyn. I'm 65 years old, and I live right here in Atlanta, Georgia. Up until about 9 months ago, my biggest worry was what recipe to make for Sunday dinner. My life was simple. It was quiet. I was a seamstress, worked for 40 years, saved my money, bought my house, and raised my son all by myself. I thought I'd done everything right, but as I was about to find out, sometimes doing everything right doesn't protect you from the wrong people, even when those people are your own family. All of this really started 3 days before that dinner. Darius, my son, showed up at the door of the tiny converted storage unit where I now lived. Yeah, a storage unit. Because I didn't live in my house anymore. Well, technically it was still my house, but that's another part of the story. Darius knocked twice, 2 little light taps. "Mom, you in there?" His voice sounded cheerful, almost forced. I opened the door and there he was, with that smile I'd known since he was a baby. But now, that smile came with something else, something I'd learned to recognize over the past 8 months. Need. "Mom, I've got wonderful news." He walked in without waiting for an invitation, like he always did. His eyes scanned the 10 by 10-foot room where I spent my days. A twin bed pushed against the wall, a wooden chair, a coat rack with my 4 dresses, and a little window that looked out onto the back alley. The smell of dampness and stored things never quite left that room, no matter how many times I tried to air it out. He sat on the edge of my bed, making the thin mattress dip. "We're having a family dinner," he announced, all excited. "Something intimate, just for special people, to celebrate Chastity's mom's birthday, Loretta's birthday." Loretta Whitaker, my daughter-in-law's mother, a woman I'd seen exactly 3 times in 2 years, always at fancy social events where I felt like a fish out of water. "It's just a regular dinner, Mom. Nothing extravagant," he went on, probably seeing the hesitation on my face. "But it would mean a lot to Chastity if you were there." Something tightened in my chest. Family dinner. It had been so long since I'd heard those words aimed at me with a shred of real affection. Since I'd moved into that little room, the invitations had become rare. I was the resident of the back unit, the old piece of furniture they didn't know where to put. "When is it?" I asked, even though I already knew I'd say yes. I always said yes when Darius asked me for anything. He was my weak spot, my curse. It's been that way since he was born. I would have given him the world, and he knew it. This Saturday, 8 o'clock, at the Gilded Lily, that French place downtown. The Gilded Lily. My heart skipped a beat. I'd walked past that place once when I had to go downtown for some paperwork. The red velvet curtains, the crystal chandeliers sparkling through the glass, the people going in wearing coats that cost more than my old car. "Are you sure, son? That place must be crazy expensive." Darius laughed. That laugh that used to be music to my ears when he was a boy, but now it just sounded rehearsed, empty. "Mom, don't you worry about that. It's a special occasion. Besides," he paused, looking me in the eye with that fake sincerity he'd perfected. "We're family, family." That word echoed off the damp walls of the storage unit long after the sound of his luxury car faded down the street. I sat down in the wooden chair, the only one that fit in the room, and looked out the window. The alley was already dark. The sun didn't reach back there. From my little room, I could hear the sounds of the main house, my house. Laughter, the sound of the TV, the smell of something good cooking on my old stove, the sounds and smells of a life that wasn't mine anymore. I was a spectator to my own story, and the price of admission had been my trust. I just didn't know, sitting there, that the price was about to go way, way up. That word, family, was still floating in the heavy air of the storage unit when I started to remember how everything fell apart. It didn't happen all at once. It was slow, like a leak in the wall you ignore until the day the whole thing comes crashing down. 8 months had passed since that Tuesday afternoon. I was in my kitchen, the one with the tiles I'd picked out one by one, making myself some chamomile tea. The sun was streaming through the window, lighting up the spice jars I kept lined up on the shelf. I felt peaceful. Then, Chastity and Darius showed up. It wasn't their usual time, and the look on their faces was way too serious. "Mom, we need to talk about something important," Darius said. They sat down at my dining room table, my solid oak table where we'd celebrated so many birthdays. Chastity pulled some papers out of her elegant purse, one of those that cost more than I made in a month of sewing. "Look, Mother Evelyn," she started, with that sweet, calculated voice she used when she wanted something. "Darius and I have been looking into the new tax laws. With how much properties have gone up, if something were to happen to you, God forbid, Darius would lose this house. The inheritance tax would take almost everything." Darius, like a ventriloquist's dummy, nodded and took my hand. His hand was cold. "Mom, the solution is simple. If you put the house in my name now, we save all that trouble. It's just paperwork. You keep on living here just like always. Nothing changes. We're just protecting your legacy, what you built." I was 65 at the time. I wasn't a fool, but I had a mother's heart. I looked into my son's eyes, the boy I sang lullabies to, the young man whose first broken heart I helped mend. I saw pleading there, or what I thought was pleading. "And if I put it in your name, it really doesn't change anything for me?" I asked, looking for one last drop of reassurance. Chastity smiled, that perfect white smile that never reached her eyes. "Of course not, Mother Evelyn. This is your house. It always will be. It's just a legal formality, a protection." I signed it. Against my gut, against the little voice in my head screaming, "No," I signed. I signed because I trusted him. I signed because he was my son. I signed because I thought blood was thicker than the ink on a deed. What a mistake. 2 weeks later, the first crack appeared. Chastity knocked on my bedroom door. "Mother Evelyn, I need to talk to you." She came in and sat on my bed, on the patchwork quilt I'd made myself. "Look, I have exciting news. Darius and I are going to remodel the house, make it beautiful, modern. But there's going to be a lot of noise, dust. We don't want it to affect you." I nodded, confused. What was she getting at? "So, we were thinking you could stay in the converted storage unit out back, just for a few months, while the work gets done. It has everything you need, a bed, a little bathroom. You'll be very comfortable." The storage unit, that 10 by 10 space where I kept boxes, tools, and my old sewing machine. Comfortable? For how long? My voice came out in a whisper. Chastity shrugged, like she was talking about the weather. "Oh, 2-3 months tops. You know how construction is, right? But it'll be worth it. The house is going to be gorgeous." Those 2 months turned into 8. The remodel, if it ever really happened, never finished. There was always a reason, an excuse, a reason why I couldn't go back to my room. And slowly, without me even noticing the exact moment it happened, I went from being the owner of the house to the tenant of the little room out back. I was too ashamed to tell anyone. Who would believe my own son would do this? I barely believed it myself. The Saturday of the dinner arrived, bringing a strange mix of anxiety and a tiny, stubborn spark of hope. Maybe, I thought, maybe this dinner was an apology, a way to include me again. I put on my best dress, a wine-colored one I'd sewn years ago from fabric I'd saved for a decade, waiting for a special occasion. I put on my black shoes, which I'd polished until I could see my reflection in them. I put my gray hair up in a simple bun. I looked at myself in the small, cracked mirror hanging over the makeshift sink in the storage unit. A 65-year-old woman stared back at me. The wrinkles around my eyes told the story of sleepless nights, of worries, but of laughter too. My hands, calloused from decades of needle and thread, rested on the sink. There was dignity in that face, I told myself. There was strength. I had no idea I was going to need every last drop of that strength that night. Darius picked me up at 7:30 sharp. His car, a luxury sedan I knew he couldn't afford, gleamed under the dim streetlights. The smell of new leather hit me when I got in. We drove in silence for a while. I watched the lights of Atlanta blur past the window. "Mom," he said, breaking the silence, "I just want you to know this night is important to Chastity. Her family's gonna be there. Please, just be yourself. Be yourself." As if myself was some kind of problem that needed to be managed. As if the 65-year-old seamstress who raised him was an embarrassment. I just nodded, the knot in my stomach tightening a little more. We arrived at the Gilded Lily, and the grandeur of the place nearly took my breath away. It was even fancier than I remembered. A doorman in a maroon uniform, covered in gold buttons, opened the car door for me. Inside, it was all golden light, pristine white tablecloths, and the soft clinking of silver on porcelain. The air smelled like money. Darius led me to a long table in the back of the main dining room, a sort of semi-private area. 11 people were already seated, laughing and talking. Chastity stood up when she saw us. She was wearing an ivory silk dress that probably cost more than 3 months of my old house payment. "Mother Evelyn, so glad you could make it," she said, giving me a hug that was pure performance. There was no warmth, no affection. It was like hugging an expensive mannequin. "Come, sit here." She pointed to a chair at the very end of the table, the farthest chair from the head, the chair where you stick the guest, who doesn't really matter, the social obligation. I sat down slowly, feeling all their eyes on me. I looked around the table. There was Loretta, the birthday girl, at the head of the table in a champagne-colored dress and a pearl necklace that sparkled under the chandelier. Next to her were Chastity's 2 sisters, whom I'd never met. Then 3 cousins, an uncle, and 2 young nephews who couldn't look up from their phones. And of course, Darius and Chastity. And me, the only one there who didn't truly belong to that tribe. "Well, now that we're all here, let's order." Chastity snapped her fingers, a gesture I found incredibly arrogant, and a waiter in an impeccable black jacket appeared as if by magic. "Bring the wine list first and the full menu." The waiter nodded and vanished. I just stared at everything. The crystal glasses, the heavy silver cutlery, the linen napkins folded into the shape of swans. Everything sparkled, everything cost a fortune. The wine came first. Bottles with French labels I couldn't read. The waiter presented them like they were crown jewels. "This is a Chateau Margaux from 2010, and this, a Romani Conti." Names that meant nothing to me, but made everyone else at the table light up. Chastity didn't even glance at the prices on the list. "Bring 3 bottles of the first and 2 of the second." I swallowed hard. I'd seen wines like that in fancy magazines. I knew a single bottle could cost hundreds, maybe thousands of dollars. Then came the menus. Thick pages of creamy paper with gold lettering. I opened mine and my hands trembled a little. Foie gras, lobster, filet mignon. Every dish had a price tag that made my monthly pension look like a joke. "Evelyn, do you know what you're having?" Loretta's voice, Chastity's mother, pulled me out of my thoughts. It was the first time she'd spoken to me directly. She had a kind smile, different from her daughter's. "Try the lobster. They say it's divine here." One by one, they all placed their orders. Chastity got the most expensive steak. Her sisters, lamb with black truffles. The cousins, a seafood tower. The nephews, pasta with caviar. Darius ordered a cut of meat that cost $200. When it was my turn, my voice came out small, barely a whisper. "Just a Caesar salad, please." Chastity laughed, that laugh that sounded like breaking glass. "Oh, Mother Evelyn, don't be modest. We're celebrating. Order something good." All eyes turned to me, waiting. The pressure was immense. "All right, the salmon then." The waiter wrote it down and disappeared. And the food began to arrive. Plate after plate, a parade of edible art. I watched, stunned, as the table filled with towers of seafood, steaks that were red in the middle, and sauces drawn in perfect designs. And the wine flowed. Bottles were emptied, and new ones magically appeared. Chastity's laughter grew louder. Her sisters talked about their latest European vacations. The cousins argued about luxury cars. I ate my salmon in silence, each bite hard to swallow, trying to become invisible. The dinner finally ended. The desserts, with chocolate towers and even edible gold flakes, were served and devoured. I just had my black coffee. I just wanted to go home. Well, to my little room. Then the waiter appeared with a silver tray, and on that tray was a black leather folder. The check. The waiter placed it first in front of Loretta. She opened it, glanced at the number, and her eyebrows raised just slightly. Then she did something that made the blood in my veins run cold. She closed the folder, and with a smooth motion, she slid it across the linen tablecloth, across the entire length of the table, until it stopped right in front of me. The silence fell like a guillotine. And that's when Chastity, with that sharp smile and eyes glittering with malice, asked, "Honey, you got cash, or are you going to use a card?" The air seemed to stop moving. Chastity's question hung there, heavy and poisonous. "Honey, you got cash, or are you going to use a card?" The word honey sounded like an insult. I looked at her face. Her smile was perfect, practiced, like she'd rehearsed this very moment in a mirror. And I knew. In that instant, the tiny spark of hope I'd been nursing in my chest died. This wasn't a family dinner. It was an execution. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, a frantic drumbeat. With trembling hands, I opened the black leather folder. There it was, the number printed in sharp, clear letters, $7,842.68. Almost $8,000. It was nearly everything I had left in my savings account, the money I was hoarding for an emergency, for my own funeral, the money I'd scraped together from selling my car last month because I couldn't afford the insurance and upkeep anymore. "Well, Mother Evelyn, we're waiting," Chastity's voice prodded, pulling me back to the present, now laced with impatience. I looked around the table. Everyone was watching me. Chastity's sisters with mocking smirks, the cousins with a morbid curiosity. The nephews had finally put down their phones to watch the show. And Darius was staring at his empty plate as if it were the most fascinating thing in the world. He couldn't meet my eyes. My son, my only son, didn't have the courage to look at me. And then, a strange calm washed over me. The kind of calm that comes after the storm has hit and you realize you've survived the worst of it. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to scream. I was not going to give them that satisfaction. I smiled. I don't know where that smile came from. Maybe from 40 years of quietly swallowing insults. Maybe from 8 months of living in a tiny room without a complaint. Maybe from 65 years of being too nice, too understanding. I opened my purse slowly. Everyone leaned forward a little, expecting to see a wad of cash or a credit card. But I pulled out something different, something no one expected. I pulled out my old driver's license, the one that still had the address of my house on it. My house, which was now legally Darius's. I placed it on top of the black leather folder, right next to the number that read $7,142.68. "I don't have any money," I said. The words came out slow and clear, so every single person at that table would hear them perfectly. "I don't have cash. I don't have a credit card with that kind of limit. In fact," I paused, looking from one face to the next, "I have exactly $10 in my bank account." The silence at the table got so thick you could have cut it with a knife. Chastity's smile vanished. Darius kept staring at his plate. Loretta, Chastity's mother, was watching me with narrowed eyes, trying to figure me out. "And do you all know why I only have $10? I continued, my voice getting stronger with every word. "I have $10 because 8 months ago, I gave my house to my son. A house I bought with 40 years of my own labor. A house with 3 bedrooms and a yard full of pecan trees. A house worth over $300,000. I gave it to him because I was told it was for protection, to avoid taxes, for my own good." I wasn't shouting, but every word carried the weight of months of built-up silence. And after I gave them my house, after I signed the papers they put in front of me, they moved me into a converted storage unit, 10 feet by 10 feet, 1 bed, 1 chair, a window that looks out on an alley. They told me it was temporary, just while they remodeled. That was 8 months ago. And do you know how much they give me a month to live on? I paused again, letting the question hang in the air. No one was breathing. $200. Chastity's sisters glanced at each other. The cousins' smirks were gone. The nephews looked shocked. And Loretta sat up straighter in her chair, her expression shifting from confusion to something darker, understanding maybe, or a cold, contained fury. $200 a month, I repeated, for food, for toiletries, to exist. While you, I gestured to the empty plates, the expensive wine bottles, the half-eaten desserts, while you spend almost $8,000 on a single dinner. Chastity found her voice first. Mother Evelyn, you're exaggerating. We give you a place to live. You don't pay rent. You don't pay bills. Her voice was shaky now, defensive. A place to live? I laughed, a bitter sound that burned my throat. You call that little room a place to live? The space where I used to store brooms and boxes? Where the sun never shines? Where the bathroom is so small I can barely turn around in it? Mom, please. Darius finally spoke. He finally looked up at me. His eyes were red and watery. I couldn't tell if it was from the wine or from shame. Don't do this here, we can talk at home. At home. The irony of that word almost made me choke. At home, Darius? In my house that isn't my house anymore? In the little room where you locked me away like a piece of old furniture that was in the way? My voice cracked a little, but I wasn't going to cry. Not there. Not in front of them. And that's when Loretta stood up. Her wooden chair scraped loudly against the floor, a sharp, jarring sound that made everyone jump. She didn't look at me. She looked straight at her own daughter. In a low, dangerous voice that silenced even the buzz of the air conditioner, she asked, "Chastity, is this true?" Loretta's question hung over the table like a death sentence. Chastity, is this true? All eyes were on Chastity now. Her face, usually so composed and smug, was pale. She opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. Mom, she's exaggerating. We take care of her. We give her money. We feed her. The words tumbled out, weak and unconvincing. Loretta took a step toward her daughter, moving around the table. Her presence seemed to suck all the air out of the room. I didn't ask if you take care of her. I asked if it's true. Do you have her living in a converted storage unit? Do you give her only $200 a month after she gave you her house? It was an old house, Mom. It needed work, and she's getting older. She couldn't keep up with a big house like that. Chastity tried to justify it, but her excuses sounded hollow, desperate. Older? Loretta laughed, but there was no humor in it. It was a dry, sharp sound. Evelyn is 65. I'm 68. Am I too old to live in my own house too, Chastity? Silence. A heavy, awkward silence. Chastity looked at Darius, begging for help with her eyes. But Darius just kept his head down, a coward to the very end. My son was a coward. We didn't take it. She gave it to us. She signed the papers voluntarily, Chastity insisted, her voice getting thin. Voluntarily? My own voice came out stronger than I expected. I stood up too. My legs were shaking, but I held myself steady. You call lying to me voluntary? Telling me it was for protection? Promising me nothing would change? I signed it because I trusted him. I looked straight at Darius. Because he was my son, because I thought family meant something. I was wrong. One of the cousins coughed nervously. One of Chastity's sisters muttered something about going to the restroom, but Loretta raised a hand and everyone stayed frozen in their seats. Nobody moves. Nobody is leaving here until this is sorted out. She turned to me. Her eyes, so much like Chastity's, but with something more in them. Humanity. Compassion. Evelyn, do you have somewhere to go tonight? Any family? Any friends? The question caught me off guard. I thought about my life, my 40 years of work, the friends I'd lost touch with because I was too busy just trying to survive, the family I never had besides Darius. No, I admitted, and that one word hurt more than all the humiliation of the dinner. I don't have anyone. Loretta nodded, as if she'd expected that answer. Then you're coming with me, to my house, tonight, and tomorrow we are going to fix this mess. Chastity went white as a sheet. Mom, you can't be serious. Loretta looked at her with an expression of pure disappointment, the worst look a mother can give her child. I am dead serious. You just invited this woman to an $8,000 dinner expecting her to pay. A woman you stole a house from, a woman who lives on $200 a month. You thought I was going to be okay with that? We didn't steal anything. The house is legally in Darius's name. Legality and morality are two very different things, daughter, and you know the difference. Loretta reached up and unclasped her pearl necklace, the one that had been sparkling all night. She laid it on the table with a soft thud. "This is worth about $2,000. Pay the bill with this, and then you and I are going to have a very, very long talk about values and decency." The waiter, who'd been watching everything from a safe distance, nervously came forward. He picked up the necklace, looking at Loretta. "Ma'am, this is more than enough to cover the check. Do you want the change in cash?" "The change is for you," Loretta cut him off, "for having to witness this circus." The waiter nodded and quickly scurried away with the necklace and the check. I sat back down. My legs wouldn't hold me up anymore. Everything was happening too fast. Loretta, a woman I barely knew, was defending me, paying a bill that wasn't hers, offering me a place to stay. "Darius," I said his name softly. "Look at me." He slowly raised his eyes. They were filled with tears, but I felt no pity, only a deep, profound exhaustion. "Tomorrow I'm coming to get my things, the few things you let me keep in that little room, and after that I don't want to see that house again." My voice was steady now. "Not until it's mine again, or never again, whatever has to happen." Darius opened his mouth. "Mom, I stopped him with a gesture. "No, I don't want to hear any more excuses. I don't want to hear any more promises. I just want my dignity back. And if that means losing you, so be it." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Chastity tried to take Darius's hand, but he pulled it away. Something in his face had broken. Loretta put her hand on my shoulder. "Let's go, Evelyn. That's enough for tonight." I stood up. I picked up my small purse. I took one last look at that table, at those 12 people who had witnessed my humiliation and my liberation in the same night. I walked toward the restaurant exit with Loretta by my side. The doorman opened the door for us, and the cold Atlanta night air hit my face. I took a deep breath. It was the first time in a long, long time that I felt like I could actually breathe. We got into Loretta's elegant car. She opened the passenger door for me, a simple gesture that made me feel more human than I had in months. We drove to a beautiful 2-story house in a tree-lined neighborhood. The guest room was 3 times bigger than my storage unit. It had a queen-sized bed with a fluffy comforter, a dresser with a mirror, an armchair by the window, and a bathroom with a bathtub. A bathtub. I hadn't taken a real bath since they moved me into that little room. "Rest," Loretta said, her hand on my shoulder. "We'll talk tomorrow. For now, just rest." She left and gently closed the door. I stood in the middle of the room, just looking at everything, touching the bed to make sure it was real. I sat on the edge. The mattress was soft, welcoming. My hands were shaking. And then, only then, in that safe space, did I let the tears fall. I cried. I cried for the 8 months I'd lost, for the house that had been mine, for the son I'd raised and who had betrayed me. I cried until there was nothing left inside me. I woke up to the sun streaming through the guest room window. For a second, I didn't know where I was. The light, the quiet, the smell of clean sheets. It all felt foreign. Then the memories of last night came flooding back. The restaurant, the check, Loretta, the humiliation. I got up and looked at myself in the dresser mirror. A 65-year-old woman with puffy eyes and messy hair stared back at me. But there was something different there. A spark in her eyes that had been out for months. Determination. I went downstairs, following the smell of fresh coffee. Loretta was in the kitchen, sitting at a wooden table with a cup in her hands, reading the newspaper. "Good morning. Sleep okay?" she asked with a kind smile. I nodded, even though it was a lie. I'd barely slept, replaying every moment of the night before. But it had been a sleep without the sounds of the main house in the background, without hearing Chastity and Darius walking through what used to be my living room, without feeling like an intruder in my own life. "There's coffee, toast, fruit. Help yourself." I poured myself a cup of black coffee, no sugar, into a white ceramic mug. The warmth of the mug in my hands was comforting. I sat down at the table across from her. Loretta folded her newspaper and looked at me, her expression serious. "Evelyn, I need to ask you something important, and I need you to be completely honest with me." She took a sip of her coffee, gathering her thoughts. "When you signed those papers for the house, did you read everything? Did you understand what you were signing?" I thought back to that day. I remembered the papers Chastity had put in front of me. The words I didn't fully understand, the rush they were in to get me to sign. I didn't read it all, I admitted, the shame burning my face. Chastity explained that it was for protection, to avoid taxes. She told me nothing would change, that I'd still be the owner in spirit, that it was just paperwork. Loretta nodded slowly, as if my words were confirming her suspicions. Were there any witnesses when you signed? I tried to remember. There was a man, a notary, or at least that's what he said he was. A young guy in a gray suit. He came to the house. He was there for less than 20 minutes. He just had me sign in 3 or 4 different places. Do you remember his name? I shook my head. No, Chastity called him on her phone. She said it was a favor, that he was coming over because she knew him. Loretta put her cup down on the table harder than she needed to. The sound echoed in the quiet kitchen. A favor, of course. She stood up and started pacing back and forth. Her movements were energetic, filled with an indignation that was all for me. Evelyn, I think what they did to you isn't just immoral. I think it might be illegal too. My heart started to beat faster. What do you mean? Loretta stopped and looked right at me. If they made you sign under pressure, without really explaining what you were signing, without giving you time to get your own legal advice, that's called coercion. And if that notary was someone Chastity knew, and he didn't do his job properly to make sure you understood everything, then the whole transfer could be invalid. Hope. It was a dangerous word, but there it was, growing in my chest like a stubborn weed after a rainstorm. How can we find out? Loretta picked up her cell phone from the counter. I have a friend. His name is Marcus. He's a lawyer, and he specializes in cases of family fraud and financial elder abuse. Elder. The word stung a little, but it was the truth. I was legally a senior citizen. I'm calling him right now. He'll tell us what your options are. She dialed a number and walked into the other room, speaking in a low, urgent voice. I could only catch a few words. Urgent, fraud, property transfer, coercion. Each word was another brick in the wall of my growing hope. When she came back, she had a determined look on her face, the look of someone going into a battle they intend to win. Marcus said he can see us this afternoon at 3 o'clock at his office. I looked at the clock on the kitchen wall. It was 9 in the morning. We had 6 hours. 6 hours that felt like a lifetime. But first, Loretta continued, grabbing her car keys, we're going to your house. Well, to the house that was yours. She looked me in the eye, her expression softening a little but still firm. You are going to get your things. All of your things. And you're going to do it with your head held high. Understood? I nodded, even though the thought of going back there, of facing Chastity again, terrified me. But Loretta's gaze gave me a strength I didn't know I had. I took a deep breath. Understood. We got to my street around 10 o'clock. Seeing my house, the house where I'd lived for 30 years, where every brick held a memory, made my stomach churn. Darius's car was parked in the driveway, and so was Chastity's. They were home. Loretta parked on the street, right in front. You ready? She asked, her hand on the door handle. I took a deep breath, letting the air fill my lungs. As ready as I'll ever be. We got out of the car and walked up the little stone path to the front door. I rang the doorbell. The familiar chime echoed inside, but no one answered. I rang it again, a longer press this time. Nothing. Then Loretta, who had no patience for games, knocked on the door hard, with her knuckles, a sharp, insistent sound of someone who wasn't going away until they were answered. Finally, the door creaked open. Chastity was there, dressed in gray sweatpants and a t-shirt. No makeup, her eyes puffy. She'd been crying. What do you want? Her voice was harsh, defensive. Evelyn has come for her things, Loretta said, with an authority that allowed for no argument. And you are going to let her in, now. Chastity looked at both of us, first at me, then at her mother. For a second, I thought she was going to slam the door in our faces. But then, maybe seeing the determination in her mother's eyes, she stepped aside, clearing the way. We walked in. The living room was the same, but different. The furniture had been changed. My old brown sofa, which held the imprint of so many friends and family members, had been replaced with a modern, soulless beige one. The floral curtains I'd sewn myself were gone. Now, minimalist blinds blocked the light. My little wooden coffee table, the one my late husband Hector had made for me, had vanished. In its place was a table of glass and metal. My house, but it no longer felt like my home. "Where's Darius?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Chastity gestured upstairs with her thumb. "Still asleep. He drank a lot last night after you all left." Of course. My son was sleeping it off while I was here to pick up the broken pieces of my life. "The little room is back here." I didn't need directions. I walked down the hall, past the closed door of what used to be my bedroom. I continued to the back, to the door that led to the converted storage unit. I opened it, and there it was. My life, shrunk down to 10 by 10 feet. The bed where I'd slept for 8 months, the chair where I sat to read, the coat rack with my 4 dresses, 2 boxes on the floor, one with shoes, the other with old photos and keepsakes. My entire life fit into 2 small suitcases. What a sad thought. 65 years, summed up in 2 suitcases. I started packing, folding my clothes with automatic motions. Loretta came in behind me and looked around. I watched her face change. I saw the controlled anger fill her eyes as she took in the space where I'd been living. "My God," she whispered. This is inhumane." I kept going. Fold, pack, minimize. The lesson they had taught me by force. "Need help?" Loretta asked. I shook my head. "I've got it. Thanks." But she didn't leave. She stood there, a silent witness to my humiliation. I packed my dresses, my shoes, the box with photos of Darius as a baby, back when we were happy, before all this fell apart. Then I saw something under the bed, an old shoebox covered in dust. I pulled it out. Inside were the documents I'd kept for years. My birth certificate, Darius's, my marriage license, the divorce papers, and there they were. The original purchase papers for the house, the deed in my name, the mortgage payment receipts, the proof that every single cent that paid for this house came from my own hard work. My heart hammered in my chest. "Loretta," my voice came out shaky. "Look at this." I showed her the documents. She took them, her eyes flying across the pages. "Evelyn, this is gold. This proves you bought the house, that it was yours, free and clear. Marcus needs to see this today." She carefully tucked the papers into my suitcase. I finished packing. 2 suitcases and a box of photos. I stood in the doorway and took one last look at that space, the place where I had cried so many nights. "Goodbye," I whispered, and I closed the door. When we passed through the living room, Chastity was sitting on her new sofa, staring at her phone. She didn't even look up, but I stopped. "Chastity," I said. She raised her eyes. "I want you to know something. You can keep the furniture, you can keep the new blinds, but this house, these walls, this roof, I paid for all of this with my own sweat and my own hands, and I am going to get it back." She laughed, a nervous sound. "Good luck with that. The house is in Darius's name. Legally, you have no right to it." I took a step closer. "You know what the saddest part is? It's not that you took my house. It's that you convinced my son that it was okay to do it. That's what I'll never forgive you for." I walked out of the house with Loretta right behind me. Just as we were getting to the car, I heard fast footsteps. "Mom!" It was Darius. He had finally come downstairs. He was standing on the porch, looking disheveled. "Mom, wait, we need to talk." I stopped, but I didn't turn around. "There's nothing to talk about, Darius." He came closer. "Mom, I'm sorry, You didn't what? You didn't think it would be like this? You didn't think it was wrong? Or did you just not think about me at all?" Tears were streaming down his face. "Chastity said you were fine, that you were comfortable." I believed her. "You believed her because it was easier," I said, finally turning to face him. "Because admitting the truth meant you'd have to do something, and we both know who you chose." I put the suitcases in the trunk of Loretta's car. I got in and shut the door. As we drove away, I looked in the side view mirror. Darius was standing in the driveway, alone, looking like a lost little boy. But instead of pity, all I felt was a cold resolve. The box on the back seat with the papers felt heavy. It was the weight of my hope. The battle had just begun. We arrived at Marcus's office at 3 o'clock sharp. It was a modern building in downtown Atlanta, with marble floors and fast elevators, a world away from my damp little room. Marcus met us in his fifth-floor office. He was a man in his 50s with graying hair, a charcoal suit, and intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through you. "Loretta told me a little on the phone," he said, gesturing for us to sit in the chairs across from his big mahogany desk. "But I need you, Evelyn, to tell me everything from the beginning." I took a deep breath and I started. I told him about the house, about buying it on my own after Hector left me. I told him about 40 years of work, sewing late into the night to give Darius everything he needed. I told him about the day they showed up with the papers, about the broken promises, about the storage unit, the $200 allowance, and finally, the almost $8,000 dinner. Marcus listened without interrupting, just taking notes on a legal pad. His eyes never left mine. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, looking thoughtful. "Evelyn, this is a classic case of financial elder abuse," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Possibly fraud, and definitely coercion." I handed him the shoebox with the documents I'd found. He examined them carefully, one by one. His eyes lit up when he saw the original deed and the payment receipts. "These papers are crucial. They show clear and indisputable ownership," he said. "Now, tell me exactly what you remember about signing the transfer documents." I closed my eyes, trying to bring the memory back. Chastity put 3 or 4 sheets in front of me. Fine print, a lot of text I didn't understand. The notary, or whoever he was, just told me where to sign. He didn't explain anything. He just pointed to the lines, sign here, here, and here. It all happened so fast, less than 20 minutes. Marcus nodded, writing more notes. "And they didn't give you copies?" I shook my head. "They said they'd mail them. They never came." "Did they pressure you? Tell you that you had to sign right away?" I remembered the urgency in Chastity's voice. "Yes. They said there was a deadline, something about tax laws, that if I didn't sign that day, I'd lose important benefits." Marcus put his pen down. "Lies. All lies, designed to pressure you and keep you from having time to think or get advice." He stood up and walked to the big window overlooking the city. "Evelyn, I believe we can fight this, but I need to be honest with you. It won't be easy. It will take time, probably several months. We need to prove there were irregularities in the transfer." "What kind of irregularities?" Loretta asked. Marcus turned around. "If the notary didn't properly verify that Evelyn understood what she was signing, if there were no impartial witnesses, if there was undue pressure, if the documentation didn't follow the correct procedures, any of those things could invalidate the transfer." He looked at me. "That notary, Chastity's friend, that's where we're going to start digging." My heart was pounding. Hope, that dangerous word, again. "What do you need from me?" "First, I need you to authorize me to request all the transfer documents from the Public Records Office. Second, I need you to write down everything you remember about that day, every detail, every word they told you, every promise they made. Third, I need you to think if there's anyone who can testify for you. Someone who saw how you were living, how they treated you." Right away, I thought of my neighbor. "There's a lady, Mrs. Ethel May Jenkins. She lives next door. She would see me sometimes. She'd say hello when I was taking the trash out from the little room. One time she asked me if I was all right. I told her I was fine, because I was too ashamed to admit the truth." Marcus nodded, looking pleased. "Excellent. We'll talk to her. Her testimony could be very valuable." He pulled some papers from his desk. "This is a representation agreement. If you sign this, I'll be your attorney in this case. My usual fee is $300 an hour, but considering the circumstances, I'll work on a contingency basis. You won't pay a thing unless we win." I looked at the paper, then at Loretta. She gave me a firm nod. "Do it, Evelyn. Take back what's yours." I signed the contract with a shaky hand. Every letter of my name felt like an act of rebellion, a declaration of war. Marcus put the document into a new folder with my name already printed on the tab. Good. From now on, any and all communication with Darius and Chastity must go through me. Do not talk to them directly. Do not answer their calls. Do not reply to their messages. Everything through me. Understood? "Understood," I said. "I'll start working on this tomorrow morning. I'll request the documents. I'll investigate the notary. I'll look for every single flaw. The battle has begun. We left the office with a strange feeling, a mix of fear and excitement. The war had been declared. The following days at Loretta's house fell into a quiet routine. In the mornings, we'd have coffee together. In the afternoons, I'd sew. Loretta had found my old sewing machine in the storage unit and brought it to me. The familiar hum of the motor calmed me. It was the one constant thing in my life right then. In the evenings, we'd sit in the living room, drinking tea and talking. She became the sister I never had. Marcus would call every couple of days with an update. He'd requested the transfer documents. He'd found the notary's name and was digging into his history. He'd scheduled a time to talk to Mrs. Ethel May Jenkins. Every call was a small step toward justice, and it fed my hope. One afternoon, about a week after our meeting with Marcus, the doorbell rang at Loretta's house. She went to answer it. I heard voices at the door. One of them I recognized immediately. Darius. My heart leaped into my throat and then started pounding against my ribs. "You can't come in. Evelyn doesn't want to see you," I heard Loretta's firm voice. "Please, Mrs. Whitaker, I just want to talk to her. 5 minutes. Please." Darius's voice sounded desperate, almost like he was crying. I came slowly down the stairs. Loretta saw me on the last step and gave me a questioning look. I nodded. "It's okay. 5 minutes." Darius came into the living room. He looked awful. He'd lost weight, had dark circles under his eyes, and his clothes were wrinkled. He didn't look like the confident, successful man he tried to be. He looked like a scared boy. "Mom," his voice cracked when he saw me. "Thank you for agreeing to talk to me." We sat in the living room. Loretta stood near the doorway like a sentry. "You have 5 minutes. Talk," I said, my voice flat, emotionless. Darius took a shaky breath, his hands trembling in his lap. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for everything." He looked at me, his eyes full of tears. "Chastity and I have been talking. We want to give you the house back." Silence filled the room. I glanced at Loretta, who had the same suspicious look on her face that I felt. "Give the house back?" I repeated slowly, testing the weight of the words. Darius nodded eagerly. "Yes, we want to make things right. Transfer it back to your name. No conditions, no tricks. We just want you to come home." Something tightened in my chest, but it wasn't relief. It was suspicion. "Why now, Darius? Why not 2 months ago? Why not when you had me living in that little room?" He looked down, staring at his hands. Because your lawyer called our lawyer. Because Marcus is investigating. Because we found out the notary had some problems. Because our lawyer told us we could lose the house anyway and also face criminal charges. There it was. The truth. It wasn't regret. It wasn't love. It was fear. Fear of the consequences. "So you're not doing this because it's the right thing to do. You're doing it because it benefits you." My voice was as cold as ice. "Mom, please. I understand you're angry, but this is what you wanted, isn't it? To have your house back. We're offering it to you without a fight, without a long lawsuit." He leaned forward, his voice filled with a desperate urgency. "We can sign the papers this week. Everything goes back to how it was." I stood up. "No, Darius. Nothing can go back to how it was." I walked to the window and looked out at Loretta's well-kept garden, at the colorful flowers. "Before, I trusted you. Before, I believed my son loved me more than a house. Before, I thought family meant something. I turned to face him, the man who was once my little boy. If you give me the house back now, it will be because you decided to have mercy on me to save yourself. But I don't want your mercy. I want justice. I want a judge to say, out loud, that what you two did was wrong. I want it on the public record. I want you to face the consequences." Darius's face went pale. "Mom, you're making a mistake. If this goes to trial, it could take years. You could lose. And in the meantime, where are you going to live? What are you going to do?" I smiled. A sad but firm smile. "I'm going to live here with Loretta. I'm going to sew. I'm going to get my dignity back. And I'm going to wait. Because I have something you don't have. I have right on my side. I have the truth." He tried to come toward me. "Mom." But I held up my hand. "Your 5 minutes are up. Loretta, please show my son to the door." Loretta opened the door. Darius stood there, just looking at me, as if he expected me to change my mind, to give in, to be the same old soft-hearted mother. But I didn't budge. I didn't move a muscle. Finally, defeated, he left. I closed my eyes when the door shut. Every part of me ached, but I knew, deep in my soul, that I had done the right thing. I didn't want the house back as a gift from a scared son. I was going to take it back like a queen reclaiming her throne. That very same night, while Loretta and I were washing the dinner dishes, her phone rang. It was Marcus. She put him on speaker. "Darius contacted me," Marcus's professional voice said from the other end. "He told me he offered to give the house back and that Evelyn refused." There was something in his voice, a tone of respect, maybe even surprise. "Yes, I refused," I confirmed, drying a plate. There was a moment of silence on the line. "Good," Marcus said, and I could almost hear the smile in his voice. "I'm glad to hear that, because I have news. I found something big, something that changes everything." Loretta and I looked at each other, our hearts racing. "What did you find?" she asked. "The notary," Marcus said. "His name is Jonathan Peters. I spent the day digging into him. He wasn't just suspended for professional misconduct last year, like we suspected." Marcus paused for dramatic effect. "He was working illegally. His license had already been revoked 6 months before he notarized the transfer of your house, Evelyn. He had no legal authority to authenticate anything at all." My breath caught in my throat. The dish towel slipped from my hand and fell to the floor. "What? What does that mean?" Marcus laughed, a sound of pure victory. "It means the transfer was never legal. It's as if it never happened. The document you signed isn't worth the paper it's printed on. It means the house never stopped being yours. Technically, legally, you are still the owner." Tears started streaming down my face, but this time they were tears of relief, of a joy so intense it was painful. I held onto the sink to keep myself steady. Loretta put an arm around me, holding me up. "So, what happens now?" I asked, my voice trembling. "We just need a judge to make it official. And with the evidence we have, the illegal notary, your neighbor's testimony about the coercion, the original purchase documents, that's practically a guarantee. It's no longer a matter of if, Evelyn, it's a matter of when. How long will it take? Hopefully, not long. With fraud this clear, I can request a summary judgment, a fast-track process. I have a few contacts at the courthouse. I'm going to try to expedite the hearing, given the urgency and nature of the case. Evelyn, you're going to get your house back, and Darius and Chastity are going to have to answer for what they did. Document fraud is a serious crime." I hung up the phone, or rather, Loretta did, and I sank into one of the kitchen chairs. The strength that had been holding me together for so many months just gave out, replaced by an overwhelming wave of relief. Loretta sat beside me. She didn't say anything. She just held my hand while I cried, sobbing like a child. They were the tears of someone who can finally see the light at the end of a very long, dark tunnel. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of anxiety and hope. Marcus worked tirelessly. Every day brought new developments. He'd filed the lawsuit. He'd secured an urgent hearing. He'd subpoenaed Darius and Chastity. He'd gathered the recorded testimony of Mrs. Ethel May Jenkins, who told them in detail how she'd seen me coming out of the little back room, looking sad and worn down. The case was being built like an impenetrable fortress. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday at 10 in the morning. I couldn't sleep the night before. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling of the guest room, thinking about everything that had happened. I thought about Darius's face when he asked for the house, about Chastity's smile at the restaurant, about my own shame and silence. I thought about all the paths that had led me here, all the decisions I'd made, and all the ones I would have to make after tomorrow. At 6 in the morning, Loretta knocked on my door. "You awake?" I opened it. She came in with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. She handed one to me and sat on the edge of the bed, like a friend getting ready for battle beside me. "Today's the day," she said simply. "Today's the day," I repeated, the mug trembling in my hands. The day I would fight for my house, for my dignity, for my life. I got dressed carefully that morning. I chose the same wine-colored dress I'd worn to the dinner, the one I'd sewn for a special occasion. It felt symbolic. That dress had seen me at my lowest point, on the night of my greatest humiliation. Now, it would see me reclaim my dignity. I put my gray hair up in a simple bun and looked at my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back was different from the one 2 weeks ago. There was a fire in her eyes, a steel-like determination in her jaw. We arrived at the courthouse at 9:30. Marcus was already waiting for us on the steps, holding a leather briefcase full of documents. He looked calm, confident. "Ready?" he asked with an encouraging smile. "Ready," I replied. We walked into the imposing building. Long marble hallways, wooden doors with gold plaques, the smell of old paper and pending justice. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. Wooden benches, a raised bench for the judge, and 2 tables for the opposing parties. Darius and Chastity were already seated at their table with their lawyer, an older man in an expensive suit with a grim expression. When they saw me walk in, Chastity quickly turned her face away. Darius, however, looked right at me. There was a plea in his eyes. Remorse, maybe, or just fear. I didn't look away. I held my son's gaze until he was the first one to look down. "All rise," the bailiff announced. The judge entered. She was a woman in her 60s, with short gray hair, glasses, and a black robe. She sat behind her bench and looked over the papers in front of her. There was an air of no-nonsense intelligence about her that gave me a flicker of hope. Case number 5732, Evelyn Beaumont versus Darius Beaumont and Chastity Beaumont. Complaint for nullification of property transfer due to coercion and fraud. Her voice was clear, authoritative, and without emotion. She looked at our table. "Mr. Johnson, you may present your case." Marcus stood up. For 20 minutes he spoke. With impressive clarity and precision, he laid out my story. The house I'd bought, the papers they'd made me sign under false pretenses, the broken promises, the storage unit, the $200 allowance, the humiliating $8,000 dinner. He presented the original deed. He presented the recorded testimony of Mrs. Ethel May Jenkins. And then he dropped the bombshell. "And, Your Honor, the centerpiece of our claim. We present here proof that the notary who certified this transfer, a Mr. Jonathan Peters, had his license revoked 6 months prior to this act. The transfer document is therefore fraudulent and legally null and void from its inception." A murmur went through the small courtroom. The judge looked at the documents Marcus handed to the bailiff, her eyebrows arching. "Your Honor," Marcus concluded, "my client was the victim of a deliberate scheme to divest her of her property. She was manipulated, pressured, and abandoned by those she trusted most. We ask that the transfer be declared null and void, and that the property be immediately returned to its rightful owner." The judge nodded and looked at Darius and Chastity's lawyer. "Mr. Delgado, your turn." The lawyer stood up. He tried to argue that I had signed voluntarily, that I understood the terms, that they were giving me financial help. But his words sounded hollow and desperate in the face of the mountain of evidence. The judge cut him off. "Mr. Delgado, how do you explain the fact that the notary who certified this transfer had a revoked license at the time?" The lawyer stammered. Your Honor, my clients had no knowledge of that. It was a good faith error." The judge looked over her glasses, her expression unreadable. "A good faith error? Hiring a notary who conveniently was a friend of Mrs. Beaumont's? Pressuring a 65-year-old woman to sign complex documents without independent legal advice?" Chastity whispered something urgently to her lawyer. He just shook his head, helpless. Darius had his hands clasped on the table, his knuckles white from the pressure. The judge continued, "I have reviewed all the evidence presented. I have read the testimony. I have verified the status of the notary with the state board, and my conclusion is clear." She paused. The silence in the room was absolute. The only sound was the ticking of a clock on the wall, each second stretching into an eternity. I held my breath, my heart hammering against my ribs. Loretta squeezed my hand under the table. The judge looked directly at Darius and Chastity, then at me. "My conclusion is clear. The property transfer made 8 months ago is hereby declared null and void." The judge's words rang out in the courtroom like victory bells. I felt hot tears stream down my face before I even realized I was crying. Loretta hugged me from the side, squeezing my shoulder. Marcus beamed, a wide smile of a job well done. But the judge wasn't finished. She adjusted her glasses and continued, her voice still firm and authoritative. "The property title will be immediately reverted to the name of Evelyn Beaumont. Mr. Darius Beaumont and Mrs. Chastity Beaumont have 72 hours to vacate the property and turn over all keys." She banged her gavel on the desk. The sharp, decisive sound echoed in my ears. It was official. The house was mine again, legally, irrevocably mine. I glanced over at Darius's table. He had his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking. Chastity was crying silently, her mascara running down her face. Their lawyer was stuffing papers into his briefcase with sharp, angry movements. They had lost. The truth had won. "Furthermore," the judge continued, and the room went silent again. "Considering the circumstances of financial exploitation, I order Mr. and Mrs. Beaumont to pay Mrs. Evelyn Beaumont the sum of $1,600. She glanced at her papers. $200 for each of the 8 months they forced her to live on that insufficient amount. This payment must be made within 30 days. Another bang of the gavel. More justice, more compensation. We walked out of the courtroom and into the bright midday sun. The air smelled different, cleaner, fresher, like after a long storm. Marcus handed me a folder. "Here are all the official documents. The property title with your name on it, the eviction order, the payment order. Everything you need." I took it with trembling hands. "Thank you, Marcus. Thank you for believing in me." "Don't thank me," he smiled. "You were the one who had the courage to fight. I was just the tool." He said his goodbyes and left, a warrior returning from a victorious battle. Loretta and I stood on the courthouse steps for a moment, just taking it all in. "Do you want to go see your house?" she asked, her voice soft. I shook my head. "Not yet. Let's give them their 72 hours. Let them pack. Let them feel, just for a little bit, what I felt when they moved me into the storage unit. It wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. There was a difference. That night, Loretta made a special dinner. Nothing fancy. Roast chicken, a salad, fresh bread, and a bottle of good, but inexpensive, wine. "To justice," she said, raising her glass. "To dignity," I said, raising mine. "And to women who get back up after being knocked down," we said together, and our glasses clinked. We ate slowly, savoring not just the food, but the moment, the triumph, the vindication. On the third day, exactly 72 hours after the judgment, Loretta and I went to the house. My house. Marcus came with us, along with a locksmith, just in case. But it wasn't necessary. The door was unlocked. We walked in. The house was empty, completely empty. Darius and Chastity had taken everything. The new furniture, the blinds, the kitchen appliances, the light fixtures, everything. All that was left were the walls, the floors, the ceilings, the shell that I had paid for with a lifetime of work. I walked through the empty house. My footsteps echoed on the hardwood floors. The echo reminded me of how it used to be, when the house was full of life, of laughter, of memories. I went into what used to be my bedroom. The walls were bare, with marks where pictures had hung. I went to the kitchen, empty too, and then I saw it. They hadn't just taken the appliances. They had pried the tiles I'd picked out one by one off the walls, leaving behind patches of cement and empty spaces. It was an act of pure spite, as if they wanted to erase every trace of me, everything I had built. But they couldn't erase the walls. They couldn't erase the structure. They couldn't erase the fact that this was mine. I went out into the yard. The pecan trees were still there. Old, strong survivors. I walked up to the biggest one and touched its rough bark. "We survived," I whispered to it. "Both of us survived." Loretta came up beside me. "It's empty," she said, her voice filled with sadness for me. "Yes," I replied, "but it's mine, and that's what matters." She smiled. "What are you going to do now?" I looked around, at the bare walls, at the empty spaces, at the infinite possibilities. I looked toward the future for the first time in a long time. "What are you going to do now?" Loretta's question echoed in the empty house. I looked at the bare walls, the marked-up floors where furniture used to be, the vandalized kitchen. For a second, despair washed over me. They had left me with an empty shell. But then I looked out at the pecan trees in the yard, standing strong and unshaken. And I knew the answer. "I'm going to start over," I said, and the words felt stronger than I expected. I'm going to fill this house up again. But this time, with things that really matter. Simple things, honest things, real things. Loretta smiled. And I'm going to help you. And she did. In the weeks that followed, Loretta and I became treasure hunters. We went to yard sales, thrift stores, and flea markets. We bought used furniture, a simple but comfortable bed, a dining table we found for $20, mismatched but functional chairs. We bought plain white fabric for curtains, basic plates, and glasses. I didn't need luxury. I just needed enough. And for the first time in a long, long time, enough was more than plenty. I got my old sewing machine back and set it up in what used to be my bedroom, which was now my workroom. The hum of the motor was music to my ears. I started sewing again, not just for myself, but for others. Mrs. Ethel May Jenkins, my neighbor, recommended me to her friends. They needed alterations, party dresses, new curtains. I charged fair prices. It wasn't a lot, but it was enough to live on, enough to buy food, enough to pay the bills, enough to feel useful and independent again. The check for $1,600 arrived on the 29th day, one day before the deadline. I deposited it in my account. I didn't spend it all. I saved half for emergencies. The other half I used to buy little things for the house, a new blender, frying pans, soft towels, small luxuries that reminded me I was alive, that I had survived, that I had won. Loretta would come over 3 times a week. We'd drink coffee at my new-to-me table, eating cake she'd brought. We talked about everything. "Have you heard anything from Darius?" she asked me one day. I shook my head. "Nothing. He hasn't called, hasn't come by. It's like I've died to him." The words hurt to say, but they were the truth. "And do you miss him?" she asked gently. I thought about the question, about the honest answer. I miss the boy he was, the son I thought I had. But the man he became, no, I don't miss him. Because that man was capable of hurting me, and I don't need that kind of pain in my life. One afternoon, I was sewing when the doorbell rang. My heart jumped. I went to the door and looked through the peephole. It was him, Darius. I opened the door, but I didn't invite him in. He stood on the porch, looking even thinner than before. He looked old for his 42 years. "Mom," his voice was barely a whisper. "Can I come in?" "Why are you here, Darius?" "To apologize, to try to explain, to ask for your forgiveness. For real this time." I hesitated. Every part of me wanted to slam the door and protect myself, but the part of me that had been a mother for 42 years wanted to listen. "You have 10 minutes. I opened the door. He came in and looked around at the simple furniture, at the unadorned walls. "You took everything," I said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. "It was Chastity," he said, slumping into one of the mismatched chairs. "She insisted, said they were ours. I tried to leave some things, but—" He shook his head. "No, that's a lie. I didn't try hard enough. I let her make all the decisions, like always. Where is Chastity now?" He looked down at his hands. "She left me. Said she couldn't be with a man who was so weak, someone who couldn't even hold on to his own mother's house." He laughed, a bitter sound. "Ironic, isn't it? She left me because I lost what she forced me to take from you." I didn't feel any satisfaction. I just felt a deep sadness for everything that had been broken. "Mom, I know I have no right to ask you for anything. I know I hurt you, that I was a coward. But I want you to know," he looked up, his eyes red, "that every night I wake up thinking about that little room, about how I let you live there, about how I did nothing, and I hate myself for it. I hate myself more than you could ever hate me." "I don't hate you, Darius," I said, and it was the truth. Hate takes an energy I don't have anymore. What I feel is sadness. Sadness because I lost my son, because you chose a house over your mother, because I don't know if I can ever trust you again." He stood up. "Is there any chance? Any way you could forgive me someday?" I looked him straight in the eye. "I don't know. Maybe with time, with real actions, with true change, but not today. Today, it still hurts too much." He nodded, defeated. He walked to the door. He stopped on the threshold. "I love you, Mom. I know I failed you, but I love you. I always have, and I always will." He was gone. I closed the door and leaned against it. The tears finally came. I cried for what could have been, for what would never be, and for the relationship that might someday heal, or maybe not. Life went on. The fall came, with its golden leaves and crisp air. My little sewing business grew. Mrs. Ethel May Jenkins's friends brought their daughters. The daughters brought their friends. Soon, I had enough work to keep me busy 6 days a week. It wasn't making me rich, but it was making me happy. And that was worth more than all the money in the world. I planted new trees in the yard. Orange trees, an avocado, rose bushes by the kitchen window. Each plant was a symbol, a reminder that life goes on, that things can grow even after being cut back. One afternoon in November, 3 months after I got my house back, Darius returned. This time, he was holding something. An old wooden box. I recognized it immediately. It was the box where I kept old photos, pictures of him as a baby, his first day of school, birthdays. I found it in the storage unit where we put everything, he said. I thought you'd want it back. I took the box. I opened it. All my memories were there. Thank you, was all I said. He stood in the doorway, waiting. Can I come in, just for a moment? I hesitated, but there was something different in his face. More humble, more honest. Okay, come in. We sat in the living room. You've made it feel like a home again, he commented. It was always a home, I replied. You just turned it into something else. But homes have a memory. They remember love. Little by little, that comes back. He nodded. Mom, I've been going to therapy, twice a week, trying to understand how I could have done what I did. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw clarity in his eyes, not desperation. My therapist says I spent years trying to please Chastity, trying to be enough for her. And in the process, I stopped seeing what really mattered. I stopped seeing you. He leaned forward. I'm not making excuses, and I'm not asking for forgiveness yet. I know I don't deserve it. I just want you to know that I'm working on myself. I'm trying to be better. That's good, Darius, I said honestly. Not for me, for you, because you have to live with yourself. You need to be able to look in the mirror without feeling ashamed. He told me he'd gotten a new job at a smaller company, that he'd rented a small apartment. And for the first time in years, I feel light, he said. We were quiet for a moment, a comfortable silence. Mom, I don't expect you to forgive me tomorrow or next month, but I want you to know I'm going to keep trying to be the son I should have always been. I believe you, I said, and it was true. But Darius, you have to understand something. Forgiveness doesn't mean everything goes back to the way it was. Things have changed. I've changed. And our relationship, if it's going to exist, has to be different. I understand, he said, getting up, and I accept that. He went to the door. Can I visit you from time to time? Just so you can see I'm keeping my word. I thought about it. It was a risk, but maybe one worth taking. Once a month, on Sundays, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. If you're 1 minute late, I won't open the door. I'll be here, he promised. And he was. Every first Sunday of the month, at 3 o'clock sharp, he would show up. He'd bring simple flowers from the market, white daisies. We'd sit in the living room and talk for half an hour. About his work, my sewing, the weather. We didn't talk about the past. Little by little, the conversations got easier. Little by little, I started to see glimpses of the son I remembered. Not the same, but maybe someone better. In the spring, a year after I got my house back, Loretta and I were in the yard. The trees we'd planted were growing strong. The old pecan tree had its best harvest in years. Are you happy? Loretta asked me out of the blue. I thought about the question, about all that had happened, all I'd lost, and all I'd gained. Yes, I answered, surprised by my own voice. I am happy. I looked at my house, my yard, my hands calloused from honest work. I had lost my son for a while. I had lost my house. I had lost my dignity. But I got them all back. And in the process, I found myself. Loretta put her arm around my shoulders. You know what I admire most about you? It's not just that you fought back. It's that you didn't let the bitterness consume you. You found a way to still be you, in spite of everything. Today, 3 years after that awful dinner, I live in peace in my own home. My little sewing business is doing well. Darius still comes to visit, and our relationship is slowly being rebuilt on a new foundation of respect and boundaries. He'll never be the boy I idolized, but he's becoming a man I can slowly learn to love again. Chastity, I heard, moved to California. She lost everything she tried to steal from me: a house, a husband, and most importantly, her own mother's respect. Loretta and I are inseparable. She's the family I chose. I learned that a mother's love can't be blind, and that blood doesn't always guarantee loyalty. I learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is fight for yourself, even if it's against the people you love the most. And what about you? What would you have done in my place? Do you think I did the right thing? Let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. And if you enjoyed my story, please give this video a like so I can keep bringing you more stories just like this one. Thanks for all your love and support. On the screen now, you'll see a couple of other stories I'm sure you'll love. Go ahead and click on one to keep watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you in the next story.